Well, we're here at the top of the hour, so maybe we could start by. It's really neat that people were coming into the Zoom room in the middle of a conversation that was happening. And I love that that's kind of the vibe that we're starting this evening with. This is a storytelling event that's happening in the winter, and it's a time for us to cozy up, to make sure we've got our mug of tea or our blanket, and that we're comfortable and that we're connected in this gathering. My name is Amanda Dodge, and I'm part of the KAIROS Prairies North Decolonization Group, and that's part of my role as program director with MCC Saskatchewan. It's my pleasure to welcome you all here this evening. And you're at the Decolonizing Ourselves, Learning Through Stories event. And we'd encourage you to share in the chat what location you're at and what traditional territory you're coming from. And while the chat is open, yeah, thank you for getting us started. While the chat is open, also feel free to, if you see someone you know, to send a wave. I'd also encourage you that if you are facing your computer or your device, to please turn your camera on. Even though we're online, we love when we get together and we can see each other, and that allows us to feel more connected. And it might be a way to serve storytellers this evening as well, that they'd be able to see their audience. So we do encourage you to do that. All right. It's great to see some locations being shared in the chat. Seeing folks from Treaty 7 in Alberta, some Treaty 6 folks, Treaty 1. Awesome. Welcome everyone here. We're looking forward to seeing folks from Treaty 4 and Treaty 6 in places in Saskatchewan, but also we're looking forward to seeing folks from across Turtle Island here this evening. So welcome and great to see where you are all joining us from. I'll note that this event is being recorded, so please do make any adjustments to your name or image as you'd feel comfortable. This event is coordinated by the KAIROS Prairies North Decolonization Group, and KAIROS is an ecumenical movement for human rights with participation from a range of Christian denominations. And its Prairies North region encompasses Saskatchewan, Alberta, and Northwest Territories. And this KAIROS Prairies North Decolonization Group is made up of settlers with the goal of facilitating educational conversations among primarily other settlers from Christian faith communities about decolonization and systemic discrimination. With the guidance of and in partnership with elders and knowledge keepers, we coordinate events to equip and educate and to equip learners for action in the work of decolonization. And we've been doing this work for about 5 years, and in that time, we've coordinated 9 events, including this one. So this event came about because we've learned that winter is the traditional time for storytelling, a time to gather, to listen, and to reflect. And it's due to the generosity of the Office of the Treaty Commissioner of Saskatchewan. We've been working with the Treaty Commissioner, Dr. Kathy Walker, who's with us this evening, who guided us in shaping this event and connected us with venerated storytellers that we have and will be hearing from. Without your support, Kathy, this would not have happened, and we're so grateful. This event is spanning 2 evenings. Now, on Tuesday evening, we heard from esteemed poet Louise Halfe share the story of Rolling Head. And if you missed that session, it was recorded, and the link to the recording will be sent out to all the registered participants. Tonight, we'll be hearing from Dr. Walker and educator Simon Bird share the story of Seacoos Weasel. Both are creation stories that have relevance to decolonization. So here's what you can expect from this evening. We're going to move now into a treaty land acknowledgement and then an opening prayer. Then I'll introduce Dr. Walker and Simon, and we'll hear them tell the story of Seacoos Weasel. Now, after the story, we're all going to be put into small groups, into breakouts for story circles. This is a time for us to reflect on what we just heard, to reflect on the story and to think about what it means to us and how it applies to our lives and our communities. Then after the breakout groups, the story circles, we're going to come back together in a large group and share some of our reflections in the chat and hear more from Kathy and Simon. And then we'll move to a closing. So that's what we have planned for this evening. And with that, I'm going to introduce Hélène Tremblay-Boyko to do our treaty land acknowledgement. Hélène is a fellow member of our decolonization group, a retired teacher and farmer, and an advocate for social and environmental justice. Thank you, Hélène.
Thanks, Amanda. We have assembled here tonight from across Turtle Island, on lands shared in sacred covenant between First Peoples and settlers. Throughout the years, peace and friendship treaties, numbered treaties, and modern treaties established enduring relationships between nations, reinforced through oral histories, ceremonies, and symbolic exchanges such as wampum belts or sacred pipes. We also acknowledge that, in addition to treaty territories, Canada has been built on unceded territories. I live and thrive on Treaty 4 territory, the traditional lands of the Nehiyawak, Nakaway, and Nakota, homeland of the Lakota, Dakota, and Métis, all original caretakers. This land has shaped and rooted me, and I encourage you to reflect on the lands that are your foundation. We recognize that treaties provide us a framework for cooperation, shared governance, and mutual respect, and we are committed to deepening our understanding of their significance. In this season of Indigenous storytelling, we gather to learn from ancient oral traditions, their original wisdom, as well as important teachings we hope will guide us on our journey to conciliation. I'd like to introduce Brandy Bilodeau. I would like to invite her to share our opening prayer. Brandy is the coordinator for the KAIROS Indigenous Rights Program, and she comes to us from Brantford, Ontario.
Hi, thank you. Nice to see everybody again. Okay, so Creator, ancestors, we come together this evening with gratitude and humility, thankful for the opportunity to gather once again in this shared space and purpose. We give thanks to the ancestors whose strength, resilience, and love continue to guide us as we walk this path together. We thank you for bringing us together again for this special gathering, and we recognize our presence here is not by chance, but part of a large responsibility to listen, learn, and grow and act with intention. As we enter this time together, we ask to be kept grounded in truth and love, in respect and integrity, and in authentic connection with one another. We offer deep gratitude for our guest speakers who have stepped forward to share their knowledge, stories, and their experiences. May their words be carried with care, and may they reach the hearts of everyone gathered here this evening, as well as to all those who will receive these teachings through the recordings in the days to come. We give thanks for every soul in attendance tonight, for their time, presence, and energy that each person brings into this space. May this gathering strengthen our connections, renew our commitments, and remind us that we are not walking this path alone. Creator, please guide our words, our actions, and our intentions so that they are rooted in care, responsibility, and love. And may the stories shared tonight continue to ripple outward, supporting justice, decolonization, and right relationship in all the ways that we carry this work forward. Amen, miigwech.
Miigwech, Brandy, so much. Thank you for your prayers. And Ellen, thank you for starting, for sharing the land acknowledgement, and to both of you for starting us in a good way. I'm grateful for that. And now it's my honor to introduce the storytellers for this evening to you all. So I'll start with Dr. Kathy Walker. Kathy is a Nehiyawak Iskweo with Métis, Saulteaux, and Nakota lineages and grew up on the Oconese First Nation in Treaty 4 territory. She's a proud mother, auntie, and cookum great aunt who has spent most of her professional life working in government, academia, and for nonprofits. A lifelong learner, she holds multiple degrees, including master's degrees in business administration and political science, as well as a PhD in political science. Prior to her role as treaty commissioner, Dr. Walker worked in academia as an assistant professor in political studies at the University of Saskatchewan. Kathy is an OCAP certified researcher with the First Nations Information Governance Center, and her research and work is informed by her lived experience and commitment to advancing public education, policy, and community development grounded in truth, reconciliation, and the resurgence of Plains Indigenous governance, including treaty understanding as recorded by First Nation oral traditions, histories, and Kisei Yinawak or elders. Dr. Walker is currently working to learn Nahiawan, the Plains Cree language. And now Simon Bird. Simon is a father of two and husband to Naomi Bird of the Thunderchild First Nation. Simon is a Rock Cree member of the Peter Ballantine Cree Nation, a language advocate and fluent speaker of the Y, TH, and N dialects of Cree, a learner of the L dialect of Anishinaabemowin. A learner of the L dialect and Anishinaabemowin. He was raised on Reindeer Lake, which will always be his home. Simon has more than 20 years of experience in education in various capacities. Currently, he's the Director of Education for the Moosomin First Nation Education Council on the Moosomin First Nation, just north of North Battleford. He is currently pursuing a PhD in Indigenous Language Revitalization at the University of Victoria. He holds a Bachelor of Education, Master's in Education Administration, and Master's in Northern Governance and Development. But he always says he will never be as wise as his grandparents, who were raised on the land. Using social media, Simon is able to share the Cree language and, from time to time, share why it's important to strengthen Cree and other Indigenous languages. You can check out his Facebook groups with the other 30,000 plus members on hashtag Cree Simon Says. He says values at the core of our Indigenous languages allow us to walk the path to being human as Creator intended. We are both so grateful that we are so grateful that you are both here this evening, sharing your time and wisdom with us. Thank you.
I just wanted to say, thank you to all of you for being here tonight. It's so wonderful that you're all interested in hearing about our ancient stories. At the Yokewana is how they say them in Nehiawewan. Simon would obviously pronounce it better. But anyway, and I just want to also thank Brandy for the beautiful prayer and also Helen for the beautiful land acknowledgement. And I also just really want to thank Simon for agreeing to be here today. I've known Simon for a really long time, and he's a very gifted educator, leader, and storyteller. And so when Amanda reached out to me about wanting to organize a decolonization event around storytelling, I really thought, you know, it's not about me telling the story. It's really about holding up and putting forward people who are really gifted at storytelling. And so that's why I asked Simon to be here and also Louise on Tuesday. And she told a very complicated story. The story tonight, I think, would be a little bit more straightforward. But anyways, I'll let Simon do the story now. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Kathy. Kinanaskubit now. It really is amazing to see so many people take an interest from all over the place. So Kita Damskat now, I'm coming to you from the Algonquin Anishinaabe territory of downtown Ottawa. My son is going to school here in Carleton, and we have a school break back home, and so he's also doing a 1 week intense class, and so we're spending the morning time before he goes to class, and then after he's done at 5, I get to we get to spend some time with as a family, and so tomorrow is our final farewells, and he'll stay here on campus where he's finishing off his journalism studies, and home is Saskatoon, or as my late grandmother would say, Saskatoon Minatigo, which means the place of the Saskatoon berry bush. You know, I recently was asked how my studies are going, and um, a mutual band member I literally bumped into here in Ottawa. We went for coffee with my girl and I. She's from Sandy Bay, originally from Sandy Bay, and she was downtown Ottawa here, and she was asking me how my PhD studies were going, and I said, I pointed to my coffee cup. You know how fast that's moving? That's as fast as my PhD studies are moving. I said, for the simple reason that I do believe that things have a time and place. And of course, these kinds of gatherings is where I really, really, really prioritize. And of course, relationships that I've developed over the years um, by likes of our treaty commissioner. And I was scratching my head and so when, or maybe some of the times that I shared a story that people would think that I was a fairly good storyteller, and I guess when you do something either spontaneous or randomly, or the things that I share on social media, or in Kathy's case, I think I shared the story of a Spider-Man. And what I did was I took a traditional story that I shared with my daughter here, and I I put in all these Cree words where it became a guessing game for her, in terms of what exactly I was talking about. So those kinds of things I have a lot of fun with. And so today's story does come from one of my favorites. Um, it really, timing is so much. It's the timing of everything is so um, um, poorly understood. I'm gonna say, so my daughter and I became the two that were left without having anything to do here in Ottawa. And so we've been shopping, and we bumped into a mutual friend, and we went for dinner, and we haven't spent a whole lot of time like that. I realize as father and daughter, I'm always on the road. I drive from Saskatoon, and I drive to Moosomin. I get up at 5, hit the door by 5:30. I come home at 6:37, 7:38. And that's pretty much my routine. And I think I'm doing a good job. But my daughter and I really connected because my wife works at Carleton, so she's off to where my son goes to school. And she gave me a hug and said, Dad, thank you for being so nice to me. And that really really hit me, because I think a lot of that, we have a great relationship, but from my perspective, I think I'm doing good by joking around with her. From my perspective, I'm trying to jam pack my parenting in maybe 1 hour a day. Meanwhile, my daughter and my wife, who works virtually for Carleton, get to spend a lot of time together. And so that special relationship is very, very strong. And yesterday, I told her the story of another story of something that I heard when I was a little boy, and everything just kind of lined up so well. And I told her that, stories are really meant to be shared during the wintertime. And I was telling her about my own father. Yeah, I would say he was my worst teacher growing up. for those of you that might know my dad, Tommy Bird, very busy guy. And I inherited a lot of those traits. I'm always busy and I love being busy. But I also not understanding how it's also translated from the people around me. And so when I was growing up, my best teacher was my grandmother. My grandmother did not speak English, and she had very limited vocabulary in English, and her favorite saying or favorite word was she would say in a very thick Cree accent, do you understand? And whatever she was trying to put together in English with a couple English words and in Cree. And so she was one of the people that really carried that tradition of timing. When I was a little boy, my grandmother was already finished raising her kids, and um, she was really getting into medicines. And I'm a curious little boy with a very busy father. My father would say he finished grade 12 because he tried grade 6 twice. And of course, that's where his schooling ended. My dad's a very successful businessman, and he carries the tradition of dog mushing, and he's in DePaul, Manitoba today. Day one of three in the World Championships. And in the summertime, what we used to do is go out on Ranger Lake, and in Ranger Lake, it was commercial fishing. By the time I came around, commercial fishing was dwindled down to just over a month from early July to the end of July. And my grandmother um, was already at the stage of, I'm going to say, the stage of generosity, stage of compassion. For many of us, we don't know um, what it's like to have a little boy or a little girl or even an adult ask you questions when we're adults ourselves and when we're young people. Many of us are told you should know better, or many of us are told, why are you asking questions? There's work to be done. Many of us were told, um, you'll know when you get older. And of course, in some of those circumstances, that's very warranted. But when you get older, when you've experienced the loss of loved ones, when you've experienced um, how rare it is for somebody to ask you questions, to sit down and have a genuine question, as I look to those that have that life experience of having kids and grandkids, and you know how precious those moments were. And I suppose that's where my grandmother's patience really came, because my name, Simon Daniel Bird, comes from my late uncle, Simon Daniel Bird. He lost his life, and due to alcohol and getting mixed up with other youth, and getting into a fight, and he lost his life. A couple of years later, I was born, and one of those traditions of passing down your brother's name landed with me. And I'm talking about timing because everything has a purpose, and I really enjoyed the tobacco that was presented, and I really do believe that everything has a purpose and a place, and especially the timing. And I want to say thank you very much to the tobacco I was given. And so when I was telling one of my stories to my daughter, everything came out in the best possible way that I really shocked myself. Uh, Um, and I've never told that story in such a way. And it was just, I was not in the rush. Nobody was distracting us. We were in a quiet corner of a restaurant, and there was nothing to do, nowhere to go, and it was just me and her and undivided attention. And the way I deliver that story is, it reminded me of the stories that I would hear as a kid. And especially when my dad is at that generosity, that stage of generosity today, and I can pick up the phone any day of the week, even if it's just 5 minutes. In fact, we almost talk every day of the week because my dad is now at that same stage my grandmother was when I first met my grandmother when I was a young boy. And my dad will pick up the phone, and even if it's just 3 minutes, sometimes it is. How do you say this word again? Or do you remember what the purpose of this thing? And he'd always pick up the phone, no matter how busy he is. And I really appreciate that. And today, my dad has taken on that mantle, that role of that generous spirit of sharing as much as he can while he can. And so the timing of everything reminds me of these um, memories that I have of how I learned these stories and the things that I've learned along the way in terms of utilizing teaching methodologies and applying those methodologies to the benefits of Indigenous language revitalization. And everything is just coming so much, the words are coming so much more easier because I've been practicing those for so long. I've been trying to spit them out, but it seems like the older I'm getting, and the more I'm thinking about these things, the easier they're coming off. And I'd hear about these times. They were before my time. I caught some of those stories at the tail end of an era. I was born in the winter of '78. And a couple of years before that, a year or two before that, the road to my community was finished. And I recently told a story of how the people's attention went from the land and started to shift south, and the land of easy living or distractions. And before then, in just around the early 1960s, people were still born on the land. And I know my dad was the first to be born in the hospital in Larange, but all the rest of his older siblings were born on the land. And they would, my dad, all my uncles and my aunties on both my mom's side and my dad's side, they'd hear it was like a normal thing for stories to be told in the winter. And if you read some of these stories today that are written down, and one of the stories, the variation of the story I'm going to be telling, is written in from Rocky Boy, Montana. There's Cree relatives over there. My wife's side, the Thunderchild family, have relatives out in Rocky Boy on the States, and there's a whole history of how they've ended up there. But in that book of Wisagi, Jack, and it tells the story. It says that it's believed that when stories are told out of season in the summertime instead of the winter time, that there will be um, a lot of lizards that will take over the land as more of a repercussion. And I thought that was interesting because I've heard variations of and other different reasons as to why you don't tell stories in the wintertime. And a lot of it is really centered around the different understandings of elements of those stories. You know, one of those elements is not being distracted. One of those elements is learning to appreciate who is talking to you while you have them. And of course, when you're a trapper, I grew up trapping. Again, the tail end of an era. I caught seagoose, yeah, as big as this one. And if you can see seagoose, it's not very big. I'm gonna put it on my face to see to see how big it is. So seagoose, this one is much smaller than you would see this one. So this one would be almost the length of from the tip of my finger to my elbow here with the tail having to be a bit longer. And so I have many experiences with seagoose, and I know that if you're if you have seen seagoose, um, it's not very big at all. And in fact, if you've been keeping track of the Olympics, they don't call this seagoose weasel in the Olympics. They call it a stout. So you might have seen Team Canada getting gold and getting a little white stuffed animal. That's seagoose. Except seagoose over there must have blue eyes because that's what the doll had. So seagoose over here, I believe, I don't know why they selected seagoose, but perhaps the story will tell you a little bit about the characteristics of seagoose and how it ended up having the white in the winter and how it ended up having the dark tip. And so, you know, these stories are really meant for people to hear these stories at different parts of their lives. And in much the same way that people go to ceremonial places, like they call it um, a medicine wheel. But in Cree, we don't have a term for medicine wheel, meaning medicine wheel. We have terms such as Kiskinoa Chichigan. I learned that term from a place in in Treaty 6 in Musquatchis, Little Bear Hills it translates to. And this elder, I asked him, I said, back home in northern Saskatchewan, where I come from, we don't have medicine wheels. But I came across a translation of what that term means. I don't think it's the right translation. It just means medicine tire. Muskie ye got the tipi and elder kind of he didn't want to laugh, but he also wanted to be respectful. And he said, "Well, that's not what we call it." And then as soon as he said that word, the way he pronounced it, Giskinoa, Giskinoa Chichigan. Giskinoa Chichigan is a descriptive word of what you do. It's a wayfinder. A closer translation is wayfinder. And if you can imagine um, an older experienced person walking ahead of you, marking the trees with an axe, and you as a young person are coming behind and you're seeing those marked trees and you know which direction that you're supposed to be cutting the trail for because it's time for that area that rested. It's time for that trail to be, it's time to make a onega, a portage to go from this part of the trap line to that part of the trap line. And you're you're seeing the way forward. It's a wayfinder. It's method. So this elder from Musquatchie explained that medicine wheel, and he didn't call it a medicine wheel. He called it Kinoachichigan, is a place that you go to and you meditate and you pray. As a young person, as an older person, as an elder, and every time you go there, you come with a good heart and you come with a bit of an offering, something that is meant to signify that you've taken time for this process. And a friend of mine, Robin McLeod from Stanley Mission, he talked about how that same exact process is what my people did for these medicine paintings. And those medicine paintings look a lot like what you see on Kathy's picture here. The same kind of style, but except not with so much detail and, of course, not with so much color, because back then the medicine people would use red ochre and a certain method of putting and preparing that red ochre and writing these visions. And so Robin McLeod, as told to him by his one of the elders in Stanley Mission, said, you're supposed to go. You know what you do with those rock paintings? You go there and you put some tobacco down and you pray and you meditate. And what you see is not for somebody else to interpret for you, but what you see is what is meant for you. And that same exact process is what we're told to take stories. I know stories. Today, young people want to know everything about everything. They will Google, they will ask AI, they will ask Siri, they will go on the internet. And if you don't give them the answer right then and there, a lot of young people are impatient. I'm going to go somewhere else. And they will tell me. So I ask, as I'm telling this story, to just, reminisce or reflect on Sigus and Wisagi-Chak. Now, Wisagi-Chak, as some of you, or maybe most of you, if not all of you, may know about in various stories. I'm not sure how you were introduced, but for my people, a lot of our people, he was a teacher, and he was a trickster, and he really was meant to to teach through his adventures or misadventures to for us to learn from. And a friend of mine from Saputawiak in Manitoba, about 15 years ago, the way she pronounced that word was so was such an aha moment for me that it just totally shifted the way I see Wisagi-Chak. The way she said it, his name was Wisagi-Chak. And she slowed it down and she emphasized those syllables to really let fluent speakers like myself that I've been pronouncing Wisagi-Chak all these years in such a way that I didn't see the depth of that word morph. A word morph is a word and another word, and sometimes even more words put together. But if you don't unpack it every once in a while, it just kind of stays frozen. So the word Wisagi-Chak, you can clearly hear the word Chak. And Chak for in our language, the Cree language, and it's certainly true for the TH dialect, the Y dialect, the N dialect, and the L dialect. Chak. is the word for spirit, a person's soul. And not incidentally, that same word is the same word that we have for a star. So when somebody, when you come across maybe a story or somebody saying, ah, Jack, they might be referring to a star. They might be referring to a person's soul. But that's not incidentally because our creation stories, and not a lot of people still retain those creation stories of how we believe that Cree people came from the stars and that we returned to the stars after we pass away in this life. And so when we say ah, Jack, it could mean one or the other. It could sometimes even be both. And the other part of Wisagi Chak, or the way Brenda Turner would say it, Wisagi Chak, and that word Wisagi, it means um, the same thing that Basil Johnston in one of his writings, in one of his books, called him bitter spirit, or Wisagi Chak. You know, if I say Niwi Sagidi Dean, I'm saying I'm hurt. Wisagi Pado, he or she is hurt. You know, Wisagi Sin, he or she got hurt. You know, that term, Wisagi Chak, Wisagi Chak, it means, it can mean a bitter spirit, or it can mean hurting spirit. And then all of a sudden, the characteristic of Wisagi-chak or Wisagi-chak all of a sudden becomes more clear. Why did our teacher, why did this central figure in our stories go on all these misadventures? Why did this trickster find himself in so many? What was he looking for? And so in this story, Wisagi-chak is finding himself coming from one adventure, and that adventure comes from um, what Randy Moore and I have been asked to do from time to time recently. It comes from the closing eyes dance, and it's been said by friends and other smarter people that have been gifted with a lot more stories of how these different stories are all connected, and you can actually tell it would take all winter for you to actually go through all of these adventures. And so today they're written in as separate tales, but you know, the likes of Dr. Kevin Lewis will tell you those are all part of one large creation stories. And of course, Randy Moore and I, we kind of go into this other story of how Wisagichak was amongst the people. And Wisagichak was told as he's laying in the sun and he's eating the berries and he's scooping up the fish as they're spawning by the river, and as he's enjoying the good life, and he would basically sit back and just enjoy a full belly and watch all the people work so hard, and he'd more or less think of them as wasting their time. And of course, the people knew something that we Sagichak had been told: winter's coming. But at that time, these nobody knew exactly how cold the winters were because they'd never experienced winter, and some variations of the story, and in other variations of the story, Wisagachak was knew exactly what was coming and he didn't care. There was a lot of berries late in the fall that he was eating to his stomach's content, and he was just picking off fish just by scooping up with his hand. And I've done that. The fish will spawn real so close to the shoreline that you can actually literally scoop them up with your hand. It's a time of plenty in the fall time. And but my dad would definitely take full advantage of this season. A lot of the children would be helping adults to pick berries. That's when the moose is fat, so you go hunting. And then when you get a moose, you render the fat and you prepare it. And then, of course, you dry all the meat. And of course, what you do with the fish, and they'd have these little huts when everybody's were using dog sleds instead of snowmobiles back in the mid '60s and earlier. There was a rare sighting for anybody to have a snowmobile, and a lot of people still were using dog teams. And of course, to preserve fish, they would build these little huts and they would string up the fish through the tails, and they'd have these little racks upon racks of fish, and that's what they would use for for bait for guys like Sigos. And of course, so back then, of course, Wisagichak couldn't be bothered. And sure enough, all the people started disappearing. And when he woke up from his long afternoon nap, it was getting a bit colder and he was hungry. And by this time, he looked at all the berries and that they have either been picked over or they had dried up. And then he looked over at the river. The fish were done spawning and they were now swimming into deeper waters. And he looked at all the other campsites, and all the other campsites were all done, and the people had moved on to go to their winter camps. And so he found himself looking and looking and finding himself lonely for company and hungry. And of course, across a small lake and across the river stopped um, uh, ducks, geese, mud hens, and loons. The older ones, they knew Wisagichak. They knew that he was to be second guest. And so Randy comes up with this this part of the story that I've never heard about. But when I grew up, Pasagwapsim, when the shut-eye dance was all about Wisagichak paying no mind, no attention, not listening to all the warnings that he was told about. And that he was hungry and he found himself trying to figure out a way to get the attention of the ducks, the geese, the mud hens, the loons. And so he came up with this plan. And so Randy says, he had a bundle. He made a bundle. He stuffed it full of grass, and he made a sack, and he put it over a sack, and then he looked like he was busy, and he's just whistling along the shoreline. And the young ducks that didn't really know the antics of Wisagichak were the first ones to ask as they swam closer, "Hey, Wisagichak!" And of course, Wisagichak always called everybody Nisimis, little brother or little sister. His way of smoothing or buttering up the relationship, especially with somebody that he's about to take advantage of. And the ducks and all the geese that knew him were not about to swim anywhere near Wisagichak. They were keeping their distance. And of course, what happened afterwards was the small ducks that were now fat, they were all ready to fly. They asked, "Hey, Wisagichak, Kiwego what are you doing?" And of course, with him whistling and with his sack over his shoulder, and he said, "Oh, and Simisak, thank you for asking. Well, and he looks in that sack. He knows what's in there, but he doesn't show anybody else. And he says, well, this is something that Creator gave me, and I would love to show you, but under these circumstances, it's not a good time. So, but if you really want to know, I'm actually setting up uh, my Migoap, in English, or the original Dakota word would be a teepee. In Cree, we say Migoap. I'm setting up a Migoap. And in your honor, I'm going to show you what Creator gave me. And I want you to invite anybody and everybody that you want. In fact, it would be a ceremony. In fact, it'll be a celebration. I have been gifted what's in this sack, and I'm going to do a presentation. But before I do, I'm going to sing you a song. It'll be a safe travels song. As you fly south for the winter, and of course, the you come back. So when it's time, when you see the fire getting hot, when you see the fire big this evening, and now that's going to be the time you come back, and you'll all be guests in my lodge. Wow. And that means there's going to be room. There's lots of room. And so Isagitak knew that he got the ducks, the loons, the mud hens, and the geese exactly where he wanted them. And so he finished setting up his lodge, his migoap, just big enough for everybody that he saw to be coming in. And also, he made a fire inside the lodge. And of course, from the outside, when the flap is open, migoap, you can see right inside. No issue. And so, of course, he took this drum and started singing. And right then and there, as if on cue, all the ducks came swimming out of the water and started walking from the shoreline right to the camp. And of course, as he's singing this song, he starts motioning everybody, and he starts to make sure that everybody was lining up and everybody was coming in. Everybody had some clear instructions. And he says, he stopped his singing and he said, what I'm going to be doing next is going to be very important. And then everybody will see what is going to be in this, in this special gift that Creator gave me, which will help you, by the way. You know how long your flights are, and you know how dangerous they can be. And whatever I'm going to be showing in here is going to be helping you more than it's going to be helping me. And so, of course, well, okay. One of the young mallards goes, quack, 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 quack. Kigoy maga, kigoy maga kay rutamak. Well, then what are we gonna be doing? And all you gotta do is you have to close your eyes. As you go into the lodge, you're gonna be closing your eyes, and then you're gonna be circling the lodge, and you're gonna be dancing one at a time. And then, of course, the mud hen in Randy's version, the mud hen was raising its eyebrows. Oh, he's hag, quack, 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 quack. What exactly are you up to? Of course, this mud hen heard stories of Wisagitchak and how he is to be questioned and maybe not fully trusted. Oh, Nisimis, he goes. You, of course, you're one of the smallest ones of everybody here. This gift that I'm going to be showing you is something that's going to help the smaller ones even more, Nasimis. Of course, when you call somebody little brother or little sister, you're appeasing to their good side. You're buttering them up and you're getting them exactly a little bit closer than they are allowing themselves to be, especially when they're hesitant. And then, of course, we Sagichak at one last little bit more coercement. Says, "Oh, Nasimus, I know about you and all the extra food that you have to eat because of how small you are. And of course, sigip is we say back home, sigip. And of course, that's the Cree word for a mud hen. And of course, so he decides to go in. And as everybody's going in one by one, and Wisagachag is now singing away. And then, of course, there's different versions. And if you're a gifted drummer, you can do a really good job of this part. But I'm not a gifted drummer. So Randy and I, that we sing this version. Hey, pasagwap se maway, pasagwap se maway. And that just means a closing eye dance, closing eye dance. And of course, as they're all coming into the lodge, and Wisagi waste no time. He has a little stick and he's knocking out every little duck that comes through there. And he doesn't kill him. He just knocks him out and then he throws him to the side. And he's doing this while he's singing. He's either tapping his foot, but his voice is going, or he's hitting that drum, or and the beat's still going and the little ducks go one by one. And it's Mud Hen's turn. And as Mudhand is coming in, and he just doesn't trust Wisagi Itag all that much. In fact, he opens his eyes. And when he does, Wisagi Chag is just in the middle of just grabbing one or two of the ducks, and he's strangling them. And as he's strangling them, and of course he's throwing them to the side, and he gets two of them. Just as he's grabbing the goose, the mud hen sees everything that's happening and he doesn't waste any time and he says, "Kinpai or no?" And he's yelling at everybody, "He's killing us! Tapasig!" And Tapasig means flee, run away. And all these ducks that were piling up, then they, of course, had a moment's nap, being bonked on the head one by one. And the goose that was in Wisagachak's hand, just as he was about to strangle it, takes off. And of course, today when you see a goose, you'll see a white stripe on its neck. And of course, it got away with that white stripe just in time before it was strangled to be a victim of Wisagi-Jack's tricks. And of course, everybody scatters, and our version up north, the one that doesn't trust Wisagi-Chag or Wisagi-Chag is the loon. And the loon was just getting ready to run away in his two little feet to take off, and the only thing that Wisagachak was so angry about was catching up to that loon and kicking it, and so hard that in both versions, the mud hen and the loon aren't able to walk on the land like they once did. And if you look at it, the loon's legs, and they're at the back of the body. And that's the same thing for a mud hen. They waddle, but they need to more or less use their wings to get where they want to go. And of course, everybody takes off. And to this day, that's why the loon in the northern version of the story walks the way it does or doesn't walk. And the mud hen. Everybody takes off. And of course, Wisagachak doesn't have as many as he wanted, but he's still very happy. And he has two big, very big young mallards. And of course, so Randy tells a story about how that evening, of course, by now it's the sun's almost coming up because this whole process is taking so much time and preparation. So now it's almost time to get everything ready, and of course he He sets up his fire, which is has another one outside of his tent there, and he's cooking. And of course, these two ducks, he basically plucks, he singes, and he burns all the feathers, and he scrapes everything over. And then he puts them over a couple steaks, and he puts that steak just over the fire, and if you've ever done that to any duck, you know that smell. It carries. It carries for a long way. And it's gonna attract any hungry customer. Yeah, or maybe not. In my case, the last time I did this with my daughter, my neighbor didn't like it when I singed about 10 geese and ducks outside of my barbecue, and all the wind was blowing right into his back window. But he didn't say anything. He never talks to me, and but all his walking around his back porch there and adjusting this thing in a frantic motion or that thing tells me that he didn't appreciate the smoke from burnt feathers going into his backyard. But he didn't say anything. So, but I got the point. It's okay. There's a reason why they say that good fences make good neighbors, I guess. And so that of course what happens, of course, is we Sagichak is as a visitor. And who other than Magisis? Magisis means a fox. Now, Magisis was smelling this from all way over on the other side of the lake and over the big hill and into the next forest, and that's where he caught a whiff of what he thought was going to be his next meal, only to find that when he got to the camp, it was none other than somebody that's even more tricky. But before he got to the camp, he thought to himself, there is nobody trickier and nobody more untrustworthy than Wisagi-chak himself. And of course, Magisis has that same reputation. And if you ever see Magisis, you'll see that he's a red coat and a black fur tail. But that wasn't always the case. And of course, what happened at that time with its beautiful yellowish brown coat, much like the coyote. So when Magisis approached Wisagichak, hey, hey, Nistis, of course, that means big brother, how are you? And at this time, Magisis was coming into the camp with a really bad limp. Incidentally, this limp only came around as soon as Wisagi-chak saw Magisis, and Wisagi-chak didn't know any of this. And of course, Wisagi-chak, hey, what do you want, Magisis? Oh, I just want to just keep you company. I know everybody's gone, but it's going to get really lonely in the winter. Perhaps I can keep you company. Oh, what do you have there cooking over the fire? What do you think, Maggie sees? I work so hard for these ducks, these sisi puck. You wouldn't even start to imagine what I had to go through. And to this day, I am already looking forward to seeing the mud hen because I gotta straighten things out with that one. And of course, Magisis is not paying attention and he's making sure that he's working extra hard to get that limp to sell it to what it's supposed to do. Get some sympathy out of him. And then sure enough, that's exactly what happens. Hey, say, Nisimus, little brother, what happened to your leg? The last time I saw you, you were running pretty good. Remember that race? Ah, yes, Wisagi-chak. I remember that race. And that race I beat you fair and square. You know that the Magisis is always going to outlast and outrun anybody on 2 feet. And of course, Wisagi-chak says, being the proud person and the being that he was, started coming up with all these excuses how on that day he was especially slow because, of of course, it was this weather, and his shoes were like this, and he was on an empty stomach, and all this and all that. And so, of course, Maggie, she said, "Hey, you wouldn't want to race another time, just for a little bit of what you have there, just a little taste, would you?" I tell you what, I am not feeling really well with this leg. And the last time we ran, you gave me such a good race that my leg ended up hurting and it never fully recovered. And of course, he said, Nistis. Almost every second word he would say, "Oh, big brother, Nistis. Oh, big brother, Nistis." And of course, Maggie sees knew he was starting to really get the attention of Wisagi-chan. And of course, about right then and there, the ducks are still cooking. They still have a ways to go before the meal is ready. And of course, Wisagi-chan being buttered up in the same way that he was buttering up his other little cousins or little brothers and sisters, started thinking, well, I could give you a race. We could race around that little lake right there, and the first one to get here will be able to really say that they're the champion from here on in. In fact, Nasimus, I'll tell you what, I'm gonna tie these rocks. You see these rocks? I've tied them. Oh, I'm gonna tie some rocks over my each leg. All right. I tell you what, you run that way. Maggie, she says, and I'll run this way. And whoever gets back to camp first, we know they have bragging rights. Everybody will know that you are the fastest. And everybody will, and I will tell everybody. Then, of course, Wisagi-chan agrees to all the terms and conditions for a little bit of what he has. He knew that when he got back, he was going to have a good meal anyway. So the race began, and they went that way, and he went that way, and of course, as soon as Wisagachak turns the corner, and he's rattling away with all those rocks in his feet, and he's not even around the corner, and right then and there, Magisis comes back to the camp, looks around, and then he goes for his well-earned meal. And he intended to only have a portion. But wouldn't you know, when you prepare those ducks in such a way that sometimes your stomach takes over and your mind shuts down, and before you know it, all the ducks are gone. And he was worried. The only thing left on that fire was these two sets of legs from these two sets of ducks. Well, what are we gonna do now? I am in trouble because everybody knows that Wisagi-chan does have powers and he can turn himself to this and that when he really needs to and wants to. And so what he does at that time, of course, is he comes up with an idea. He takes those two sets of legs and he decides, I'm going to put them right near the fire, and the only thing sticking out right by the fire as it's going down and that fire starting to smolder is these two little feet. And of course, he takes off and then he goes up on a high hill over there, right amongst the yellow grass where you can hardly see him because he's blending in with the yellow grass. That's where he fell asleep. And so, of course, Wisagi-chan is running and he's running and he's running and he gets to his camp. And what does he see? Nothing but these 2 feet sticking out. And he says, "Oh no, I've been gone way too long. And nothing is left except for these 2 feet. Everything is burnt up." And he thought he saw a track or two where they shouldn't be, and he starts looking around, and sure enough, he starts to clearly see that the fox was at the camp, and the fox was covering its tracks, and the fox was the only one to blame for the missing food. These are hard times. This is not a time to be going into the winter with an empty stomach. And so he made sure that he tracked the fox, and where he found the fox was, sure enough, he almost couldn't see him, but it was so the fox was sleeping in the yellow grass where he blended in. So of course Wisagi Chuck said, I am gonna be making sure that this is gonna be a lesson to be learned. This is gonna be the time Magi sees will never forget. And so what he did was he built a small little enclosing over the fox, and he put all the grass and a bunch of sticks in terms of almost like a pound. And the only opening was right through this very small space. And of course, back then we didn't have lighters, so Usagi Jack did not need a lighter to start a good fire to make sure that the fox was going to learn his lesson. And of course, he set everything on fire. And hey, he said, "Hey, little brother, wake up, you're on fire." And of course, Maggie sees woke up from his deadly nap and looking around, he saw a wall fire over there and a wall fire there and all around him. This is little brother, the only way that you can escape with your life is going through that hole right there. Of course, that little fire was starting to go, except Maggie just didn't know which fire that was and how big it was, but he only had to trust that the only person calling him out. And so he jumped through that fire, and that fire he did catch on. He was all red and fire, and he was burnt on his tail. And to this day, Maggie sees is red in color, not like the color that he first had before crossing paths on that day with Wisagi-chan. And of course, Wisagi-chan went about his separate way, satisfied that Magisis had learned his lesson. And of course, in the fall time, all the dry grasses will only burn for so long because everything is all ready to rain, or the cold is all ready to put everything out, not like when it's on the hot summertime. Yeah, and of course, one of the stories that Wisagachak was told, if you ever catch yourself traveling from one territory to the next, and you find yourself in the winter storm, you know what to do. You don't travel through those winter storms. You especially don't travel in the opening areas. It's okay to travel right along the bush or right in the bush, but if you catch yourself in open areas, Wichtigo is sure to be nearby, because the Wichtigo is in the Anishinaabe, you can see Kathy's painting there by Norvell Morceau. It's a being that is as a will eat, and of course it will eat everything and anything it comes across. And so Wisagi-chan, not being one to be told what to do, how to do something, and when to do it, didn't listen again. And he knew that he had to get into his winter camp, because now he was caught where he shouldn't have been caught, in a territory that's not going to sustain you in any winter season. So instead of going through the trail that he marked for himself, the years prior, and he knew very well, he thought he would cross this part of the land, and it was a bush clearing with not much sticks around. And to get to his territory faster, he would go ahead and take that shortcut. And so when he did, guess what? He found himself almost face to face with Wichtigo. And of course, Wichtigo, being the tall being that he is, and having that cannibal spirit, no lips, chewed off fingertips, hair every which way, knew exactly what he found himself in front of. Yet it was Wisagi-chan. And Wichtigo also had ways to do what he needed to do. And he also was, I wouldn't call him gifts, but he also knew that he could manipulate certain things. And that as soon as he found himself in front of Wisagichak knew he was in trouble. And he told Wheat to go, don't eat me. I am just minding my own business. And at this point, he was already defeated and he was begging for his life. And of course, Wheat-to-go says to him, no, Sim, Nisimis, Ndotim. All those words are different ways to acknowledge somebody. Oh, my grandson, my little brother, my fellow human being or my fellow being, Ndotim. Mas, anoche, today will be your last day. What's gonna happen now? You're gonna make a fire. Everything that I've been eating is directly from the land, and it's always raw. Because it's you, because I know your ways. What's gonna happen now is you're gonna make me a fire. And when that fire is ready, you're gonna be my special guest for dinner. And of course, Wisagichak knew exactly what was being said to him. He knew that he could try to run and Wheat-to-go would be right there, catching up to him. And he didn't want to be eaten alive. He didn't want to be eaten like that. And he didn't know what to do. And he did as he was told. And so what Wisagichak started slowly picking up the wood. He tried to buy himself as much time as possible. He was so slow to make a fire to gather a little bit of wood around him, and he couldn't go very far. And he had to dig deeper in the snow because the snowstorm was raging. And we used to go, couldn't be bothered with the cold. Took a short little nap and fell asleep. And of course, Wisagichak knew that this was the time to be able to do something, but he already knew that if he tried to make a run for it, Wheat-to-go would catch up to him. And besides, it's been a long time since, by that point, that Wisagichak had a good meal, so he didn't have the energy. He didn't have anything going for him. And of course, and he's picking up the last pieces of the wood, making his way back to where Wheat-to-go is, not too far. He saw Wheat-to-go right there. And Wheat-to-go is laying on its big stump and with his back turned. And he had his mouth open, gaping wide open, and he's sleeping. He was snoring away. And he looked scary. The noises coming out of him were scary. The stench coming out of his breath was something that you've never smelled in your life. And of course, on his way there, guess who pops up? And it's this Sigos. And he's looking at Wisagichak. Stace, what are you doing? Of course, Sigos just got here. And Sigos doesn't know that Wheat-to-go's right around the corner. And of course, who's happy to see Sigos? Nobody's happier to see Sigos than Wisagi-chan. Nasimis, astam. And of course, that means come. And of course, Sigos says, what is it? What is it? Kigoe. Wichihin, help me. And at that time, Seagoose was not this color. It didn't have a beautiful white, slender body. It didn't have a black tip. In fact, it was brown and the same color that you would see weasel, Seagoose in the summertime is that was its fur coat all year long. And of course, Seagoose was about this size at the time compared to this size. Big difference. And if you know anything about Seagoose, it can kill animals twice as big as you have here. I've seen Seagoose hunt rabbits. I've seen Seagoose hunt squirrels, muskrats. It is a very, very good hunter, despite being how small it is, even though it's this size today. And but no matter how big anybody gets in the weasel clan or in the weasel family, it's very, very adaptable to hunting mice and every other small rodent out there. And of course, at that time, Seagoose was no bigger than what we have here, a small version, and it was brown. And he, of course, the thing that we Sagi access to Seagoose is, and Seamus, Wichihin, help me. I said, well, what am I supposed to do? I see what you're talking about and I see your situation, but what am I supposed to do? Well, I tell you, if you can do this one thing for me, I will gift you something that you will make the other predators wish that they had what you have, being the size that you are. Well, exactly what am I supposed to do? And of course, at that time, uh, Wisagachak whispers into Seagoose's ear. You see the way he's sleeping with his mouth wide open. Yes, 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 yeah. Okay, what I want you to do is just trust me on this one. You know, that big bugger right there, despite how big he is, he doesn't know how to handle small animals. So what we're going to do is we're going to have you're going to jump in its mouth. And when you get into its mouth, you're going to crawl right into its heart and you're going to chew up all of its heart and it's going to fall over. I tell you as I know, and this is going to work. And of course, Seagoose, being the brown color that he was at that time and being this small, of course, what happens is he agrees only because he sees that there are good sides to Wisagi Jack, despite all the tricks that he's played, a lot of beings that he too deserves a second chance. And there will always be another week to go down the road, and then perhaps this one time Wisagi Jack will learn his lesson. And with that, as Weetigo is snoring away, little weasel just pops up on top of that stump and as quick as lightning jumps in and right into its mouth. And as soon as that happens, Weetigo is starting to search what's going on. He thought he swallowed something and it's definitely not the season for any flies or bugs. And sure enough, he grabs something and he starts scratching at his chest and he gets up and he screams and he screams and he's digging at something and in pain and in pain. And he looks over at Wisagi-Jack and he goes over to him. And but before he reaches Wisagi-Jack, and Wisagi-Jack standing still there like a big stump himself, scared. Now he knows he's in trouble. But before Weetigo reaches him, he falls over. Just like somebody cut down a huge tree and the way it falls is boom. And right then and there, Wisagi-Jack knows that his little brother has come to save him and to help him. Now he's worried. He looks over this way and he looks over that way. And in some versions of the story, the Seagoose comes out that crawls out of that mouth of 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 wheat goat. And of course, it's all covered in this brownish red color, and that version there that I grew up listening to, but perhaps it was because I was younger. Um, it came out of the mouth, and when it came out of the mouth, of course, well, we Jack grabbed it by its tail, and you see this black tip right there is the part that Jack took this brown, red colored little weasel, this little sea goose, and it cleaned it in the snow. And of course, that's why you have little weasel being the color that it is in the winter time, and in the summertime, it turns back to its original color. And of course, in the process of cleaning it and cleaning it and cleaning it and cleaning it, he grew to even a bigger size than what he is now. And so this weasel, it gets to be pretty big today. And of course, it turns white in the winter, and it turns back to its original color in the warmer seasons. And of course, when I heard the same story again and as an adult, it didn't come out of the mouth. It came out of another hole. We think it was hole, and it was stinky, and that's why it was grabbed like this, and Waisagi Chaka's like this, and that's why it's extra white, and that's why it's extra long because of the amount of washing that Waisagi Chak did for his little brother that helped him save his life that day. So that's the story I have about Waisagi Chak, Wihtigo, and two of the stories that I connected to Waisagi Chak's adventures. And this one, of course, being with Wihtigo. And that's one of the versions of Weasel. It was
Simon, thank you so much. We're seeing heart emojis come up and some applause emojis. We've just been on like the edge of our seats, taking in every word. And thank you so much. Incredible how you weave the stories together, like from being with your family to through the whole story. Thank you so much for the gift you gave us. We are now going to move into story circles. These are small group discussions that we can have. And Kathy has prepared the discussion questions or reflection questions for us to consider in the story circles. So Jordan has just popped them in the chat there. They start with some sort of more general questions and then some specific questions, which Jordan will also add about the different characters in the story. Welcome back, everyone, from the breakout rooms. Wonderful to see all your faces. Trust that your conversations were quite rich, although, of course, we would have wanted more time to have those conversations. But trust that they were excellent times to reflect on what you just heard and what you've learned from what you just heard. We might be waiting for a few more folks, but in the interest of time, because we do only have about 15 minutes left together, we want to hand it over to first to Kathy. Simon's encouraged Kathy to share her interpretation of the story, and particularly with an emphasis on week to go, I believe.
Okay. Thanks, Amanda. So again, thank you again, Simon, for such a wonderful story. So I just wanted to say that when I was younger, I was not told the stories of Wisaki Chuck. It wasn't until much later in life, actually. And it was kind of funny because I came across the story of Sea Goose soon after my dad had passed away. And the funny thing is, when he was alive, he once said, I know all the Wasaki Chuck stories. And he was proud of that, but he never told us any of them because he was a product of residential school. And so he had put away all of that knowledge. Um, so it really felt like, um, when the story came to me, that it was him bringing that story to me. That's how it felt. And it came at a time in my life when I was doing my dissertation, and I was um, searching for the right stories about decolonization and how to deal with it. And I feel like this story to me is really about decolonization, because I think that the biggest problem when it came to colonization is that a different way of being was introduced to Turtle Island that was basically a wheat to go way of being, that's based on consumption and a cold heart. So the most monstrous part of uh, the wheat to go is its cold, cold heart, because its heart has turned cold, it fails to see other living things as its relatives. It sees them instead as objects for its own, to satisfy its own hunger and desires and to consume, basically. And when I heard the story of sea goose, it just made a lot of sense in terms of studying like colonization and how some of the systems are really about, and the structures are about, they're not about care or about treating one another as relatives. They actually cause us, they're like wheat to go structures, right, that consume us. And when you think about like just colonial policy, right, like residential schools, right, and they were very wheat to go in terms of consuming the hearts and minds of children, right, and even killing children. Uh, was also part of that. So, it was a type of consumption in so many senses of the word. And even, when you think about some of the systems still that are based on this consumptive hunger for more and greed and stuff like that, right? So that's what the wheat to go to is the most fearsome character, right? In Cree storytelling, Cree I hate to use the word mythology, but philosophy, um, because of its monstrous heart, because of its lack of care for others, and because it's just basically based on greed. So anyway, and then Seagos is interesting because how does Seagos defeat the Wheatigo? She has to go in indirectly into the Wheatigo. She can't face the Wheatigo head on. And if you look at Wasaki Chuck gets into trouble with the Wheatigo because he's trying to take a shortcut. And he's also, he is forced to build the fire that's going to kill him because of this Wheatigo, this structure. You can think of it as path dependency in terms of institutions and structures, right? And he's powerless against it. He's crying out. And even though he sees the danger, he can't do anything about it. He has to just keep building the fire that's gonna kill him. And so Seagoose comes along, and Seagoose is the smallest little hunter. You know, scientists have called the weasel a cosmic joke because they are a predator that is the size of a chipmunk, and they also have to kill way more than any other predator, like 3 times their body weight a day to stay alive. as opposed to your average predator that only has to kill like um, a third of its body weight a week. So Weasel is a very interesting character, and there's a lot of intergenerational knowledge in that story too about Weasel itself. But anyway, but see, so in a way, Weasel is really like those of us who go into different institutions to decolonize them. And how do we do that? We do that by finding our way in, sometimes going in through the scariest places, the mouth, or the dirtiest, coming out the dirtiest places. But we go in, and you have to be brave, and you have to just keep trying until you get to the heart of that institution and you cut the cords that hold it, right? And the other thing is with this story is that in some tellings, Seagoose actually dies. She doesn't make it out. She's once she cuts the cords, she's completely drowned by the blood from the Witugu's heart. But Wisaki breathes life back into her. And I kind of see that too as really symbolic, because how many times have we gone into places or institutions and had to sacrifice our jobs, or had to kind of die in some way in order to try to reach the heart of it, to stand up to that wheat to go structure. And sometimes that can mean getting fired or whatever, right? So I know I've been in there. I've been in that place at times. So anyway, so that's just my 2 cents. But the other thing is, I was just thinking about how the heart is so predominant in this story too, and how Sigo's heart, the weasel's heart actually also, their heart beats faster than any other creature as well. So you could say that they're extremely strong-hearted. And that's what motivates them, right? So I feel like with this story too, it's also asking us about, like, for me anyway, what motivates me? Um, and and is reminding me about the Wetago and what motivates the Wetago, because we all have the Wetago as well. Like all of us have this Wetago tendency in us as well, and Seagoose, and also we have that transformative energy of Wasaki who's like the linchpin here, right? That brings everybody together. And when I think about treaties, and I think about the motivation or the spirit and intent behind the treaties from the First Nation side, it really was about how to help everyone live better lives. And they're grounded in doctrines like Wakotoan, right? Which is this idea that we're all related, this interrelatedness. And it's also this idea of this, that we're spiritual beings that are all connected, right, through spirit. And so, anyway, I just think that there's just so much meaning and applicability, right, when it comes to Sigos, and the symbolism in the story and the focus on the heart. And at the end of the day, just asking ourselves, what motivates us? Are we, is it a warm heart, or something altruistic or compassion, or is it selfishness, right? That desire for hunger for something. So anyway, I'll stop there. And I just want to say that, like, the elders really were grounded in these doctrines and in these stories. And that is what's behind the spirit and intent of treaty from a First Nations perspective. Yeah.
Mm.
So that's my interpretation.
Thank you so much for sharing it and for that such teaching and what you just shared with us. You're seeing the appreciation in the emoticons coming up, and it's such a helpful and inspiring, empowering word for us, where we so often feel like we're small and powerless when we're trying to change these big unjust systems. And we're inspired by Seagoose and by your interpretation about how can we be creative to find indirect ways to move into the hearts and affect the hearts of institutions, and to be checking our motivations as we do. Thank you. for sharing that with us. Um, I wish we could have another hour together to invite reflections from folks who are in the small groups. But we are coming up to the top of the hour in our time together. And so I am starting to see some appreciations in the chat, and I would encourage more. I'd encourage all of you to join me in thanking Simon and Kathy for just the richness and the robustness of what they've shared with us tonight, through storytelling, through teaching, and through connection. We are so blessed to be in this community together and to be able to support and encourage each other as we try to do this decolonizing work in a good way. Just feel immensely grateful. And I hope Simon and Kathy, you're seeing these words of appreciation coming up in the chat. So to close, we want to thank all of you attendees for being with us this evening. We're so glad you're here. We also want to just, acknowledge again that it was because of Kathy that this storytelling event was even possible, and we're so grateful for that. In a moment, our tech folks are going to put an evaluation link in the chat, and we'd really encourage you to take a few minutes to visit this. It's like a Google form that asks a few questions. As we do these events, we always invite input, and they really shape the way that we plan future events. So if you can do that for a few minutes, that would be great. Yeah, there's ways too that you can learn a bit more about KAIROS's work, in general, and focusing on Indigenous rights and how, those of us who are involved with KAIROS are walking out commitments to truth, healing, and reconciliation. And we're doing this locally in our region here in Saskatchewan, Alberta, and the Northwest Territories through this decolonization group. And if you are interested in learning more about the work that we're doing and coming alongside and joining us, we would love to connect with you. Our email address has just been posted in the chat, so please don't hesitate to reach out. So I think that's all we had for the evening. It's been beautiful to see these words in the chat, and maybe we could unspotlight me and we could see the gallery of faces who are here, and be able to wish each other a good evening, and go in peace.
Thank you. And thank you again to our treaty commissioner for extending the invitation. It's been an honor, and for everybody involved. KAIROS, thank you very much. Ninanaskuma, thank you.
Thank you so much. Kinenaskumitnawa. Hi. Mistes.